Hello, this is Editing Kevin here. I realized that throughout this entire video, I referred to ferocious as formidable. God, it was a problem that they named those mechanics so similarly in the same block. So assume, unless I'm listing off all the mechanics in the Tarkir block, every time I say formidable in this video when talking about the green-red archetype, I'm actually referring to ferocious. Can you believe that Tarkir Dragonstorm was released in April of 2025? Between Final Fantasy, Edge of Eternities, Spider-Man, and already we've seen a ton of previews from Avatar The Last Airbender later this year, it feels like Tarkir Dragonstorm was totally buried underneath other Magic sets. It may not have been the smash money printing success that Final Fantasy was, but longtime Magic the Gathering players rejoiced at the chance to finally return to Tarkir, and the set's mechanics and flavor were pretty well received overall. However, one minor criticism that popped up over and over again was, where were the Dragon Lords? The story of the set told us that the Dragon Lords were overthrown and mysteriously disappeared, and subsequently the 5 old clans were reinstated. But there were few cards that showed us exactly what happened, and that was a shame. I personally would have been totally happy to see Wizards of the Coast release 2 sets on Tarkir this year, one showing the defeat of the Dragon Lords, and then Tarkir Dragonstorm would have continued the story with the rebuilding of the clans. It certainly would have been a better choice than Aetherdrift turned out to be, judging by fan responses to that set. Anyway, that is what I am here to do today, reverse engineer what a second 2025 Tarkir set would have looked like. Now I need to give a couple of disclaimers before we get going. I am not trying to say that I know better than the actual game designers at Wizards of the Coast. I am working with hindsight, as well as a creative environment devoid of any deadlines or budget limitations. Also, while I certainly have my own ideas as to how I might change Magic's story if I was in charge, I won't be doing any rewrites or retcons in this video. I'm just trying to create cards that fit within the small amount of information WotC gave us about the events that occurred shortly before Tarkir Dragonstorm. I might add additional information through flavor text, but I won't change anything that had been expressly stated to be true. Finally, while this would be a set existing on Tarkir and theoretically released right before Tarkir Dragonstorm, this is not a 2-set block. Wizards has shifted away from doing these, and while there are always fans that will miss the model of game design where blocks were important, I understand why it is easier to design a set for limited play without having to worry about what came directly before or after it. With those disclaimers out of the way, let's get into the creative process. Now, the first big question we need to answer is, what does this set bring to the table that Dragonstorm doesn't? And thankfully for us, at least a part of the answer is obvious: the Dragon Lords. Dragonstorm gave us lots of dragons. They definitely delivered on their promise to give fans the best of both worlds by mixing the 3 color clans with lots of powerful, cool-looking dragons. But the 5 Dragon Lords from Fate Reforged and Dragons of Tarkir were important characters to both the lore and critical pieces of the game's mechanical history. Just to give a quick anecdote, the first commander deck I ever played with was one of the 2022 starter decks, headed by Atarka Worldrender. So I too have a personal connection to at least one of the Dragon Lords, even though I never played during the original Tarkir block. So that's the first thing we need: 5 Dragon Lord cards, likely mythic rare and very splashy and flavorful. But obviously a set needs to be made up of more than just 5 powerful cards. So what else can we do? Well, Tarkir Dragonstorm introduced all new mechanics for the resurrected clans. Abzan was given Endure, Jeskai used Flurry, Mardu had Mobilize, Timur got Harmonize, and Sultai received Renew. All of these mechanics were evocative and played well into how people remembered the original clan's identities. There were also Omens and Behold Dragon cards in all 5 colors. However, no mechanics from the original Tarkir block made a return. Raid did come back into Standard with Magic Foundations last year, which is awesome, but if we have the chance to add another set on Tarkir, I feel like it would be a great opportunity to revisit some of the other popular mechanics from the original block. One notable absence from Tarkir Dragonstorm was Morph or Megamorph, or some other kind of face-down mechanic. That omission was probably decided on because there are already Disguise, Cloak, and Manifest Dread cards running around in Standard right now. We don't want to make too many mechanics that all do similar things, because that can get confusing for players.
However, let's put a pin in this idea, and maybe we can find a way to include at least a few face-down cards in the set we're creating. What other mechanics do we have to work with? Well, we can totally reprint Raid again in this set, since it's a very basic mechanic, but other options are Bolster, Dash, Delve, Exploit, Ferocious, Formidable, Outlast, Prowess, and Rebound. First, let's eliminate all the mechanics that we likely don't want to include. Delve is a very popular mechanic, but is easy to make broken, so we want to be really careful with that one. On the other hand, Rebound, Outlast, and Formidable are either underpowered mechanics or usually are only broken if you're already winning the game anyway. Prowess is a great mechanic, but it has become deciduous, almost evergreen, so printing a lot of cards with Prowess in the set would probably be fun, but it wouldn't really be a thing players have been itching to see again, since it happens pretty regularly these days. Out of this list, the one that immediately jumps out at me is Dash. Dash is a mechanic printed on creatures that says, you may cast this spell for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste, and it's returned from the battlefield to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. Dash was a pretty cool ability and hasn't been reprinted in a standard set since Tarkir, so players would probably be pretty excited to see it return, and we could do some new and unique twists on it. Ferocious is a commonly used mechanic, but that's for good reason. Playing creatures with power 4 or greater is going to be an option in almost every set, so it is very easy to design or draft around. Plus, players like casting big, powerful creatures, and big, powerful creatures can win games. There is one more reason we might consider using Formidable, but we'll get back to that in a moment. Bolster is an effective mechanic to use, though Endure from Dragonstorm is more flexible and does almost the same thing, so we may want to avoid using Bolster because it would probably just get overshadowed by Endure in players' minds as soon as Tarkir Dragonstorm released. Exploit is a useful mechanic and is very flavorful. That could serve as the mechanic for the Silumgar Brood, but Exploit has been reprinted before in a standard set. It was reprinted in Innistrad Crimson Vow, which also printed it mainly on blue and black cards. Still, it isn't a bad thing to repeat what has worked in the past, as long as we are intentional about it. So, Dash can be the returning mechanic for the red-black archetype, making it our de facto aggressive color combo. Red-green can reuse Formidable, so it will care about big, stompy creatures, and blue-black can use exploits to sacrifice their creatures for value. We have yet to arrive at a satisfying idea for the Azorius or Selesnya color pairs. We could always reuse Rebound as our backup for blue-white, which would make it a color pair that cares about instants and sorceries, which is not a bad idea. You usually want at least one color pair that works for Spellslinger decks. Selesnya often cares about +1/+1 counters, and that was definitely true for Tarkir block as well. So we can always fall back on that as our idea as well, though I'm really interested in trying to do something a little more innovative for that pair, if I can. So let's return to our original goal, giving the Dragon Lords their due as villains and showing the events of the clan rebellion. While there are many factions involved in Tarkir's world, ultimately this set is likely to focus on a two-sided conflict, Dragon Lords versus the Uprising. In that case, what if the 5 allied color pairs all cared about fulfilling a condition that dragons typically can fulfill, but it doesn't explicitly require a dragon to benefit? To give an example, Formidable requires that you have a creature with power 4 or greater. That creature could be anything, a beast, a human, or even a goblin. It just has to be strong. Now, out of the 400 dragon cards in Magic the Gathering, over 300 have power greater than or equal to 4. So if we put Formidable in our set, likely any dragons in the set will automatically trigger it. It isn't the most revolutionary or intricate solution, but it works. So what else are dragons in Magic the Gathering known for that we could use to build archetypes around, aside from just being dragons? The most obvious one is that dragons usually fly. Okay, Flying Matters is a tried and true archetype for Azorius colors in limited formats. Aven, Jinn, and Spirits have flying too, and can be added at common and uncommon rarities to fill out this archetype. Dragons are also known for breathing fire, which in the game of Magic usually is translated into either doing direct damage, like on Dragonlord Atarka's card, or an activated ability that allows you to spend mana to buff the dragon's power, like on Shivan Dragon. But we already have Dash for red-black and Formidable for red-green, so all of our allied pairs with red in them are accounted for. So we need to find a workaround. How about we borrow a really interesting draft archetype from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan? In that set, the green-white archetype cared about buffing your creature's power somehow. It didn't matter if it was with auras, equipments, buff spells, anthems, or +1/+1 counters, so long as your creatures got stronger. Fire breathing on dragons would work well for this archetype, but so would all sorts of other effects, so that seems like a nice, flexible way to design our Selesnya color pair cards. Great! Half of our set's draft archetypes are finished, and we currently have 3 returning named mechanics included. That means we have space for about 2 other major mechanics to include between the other 5 color pairs, and maybe 1 or 2 minor mechanics. In the next video, I'll cover some reprints and new card designs for the 5 archetypes we designed today, and see if they can give us clues as to what direction we should take the 5 remaining color pairs in. Thank you so much for watching this video. What would you like to see from a Tarkir set taking place during the overthrow of the Dragon Lords? Which of these allied color archetypes would you like to draft the most? Let me know in the comments below.